Ralph, would you like me to pull up my presentation? Looks like Rolf is now on mute. I don't know if you can see that, Rolf, but you're on mute.
Yeah, okay. So I want to welcome everyone, and I apologize that I was on mute. Um, we will be running this speaker series for all the way through the next year. We are having some issues here. This jumps around. Maybe it's Bill. I don't know what it is. Anyway, you can all hear me still. We will be running this series all the way into February, March of next year, and they're once every 2 weeks, and we urge you to sign up. And I personally, I work with NASCA, the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance, and I also work with the Friday for Future group. And I'm personally talking to you actually out of Sweden. And I'm pleased tonight to introduce, or this morning, to introduce Bill Manteiga. He's a member of the NASCA board. He's very enthusiastic about electrical vehicles, and we're all in a learning process, and we'll find out through Bill his discoveries and his abilities. He's a very astute analyst, I would say, and I will let you introduce more of your own background, and I will be the moderator. And if
Sure. Thank you, Ralph, and thank everybody. No. Thanks, Ralph, and thanks everybody for attending and taking a little bit of your Saturday. I'm going to be presenting what I hope is a balanced view of electric vehicles. As you look at the press, and they're very much in the press these days, you can read everything from the fact that they're greatest things since sliced bread to they're not very good. So, what I've tried to do is cut through, read a lot, talk to a lot of people, really try to understand where we are. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert, and I'm sure you won't be surprised that I think on all electric vehicles are less environmentally damaging than internal combustion engine vehicles. So that's a little spoiler alert. But like a lot of subjects today, things are complicated, things are nuanced, and I'm not going to tell you that EVs are nothing but good. There are some negative impacts. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the negative, a little bit about the positive, and some about the trends. So that's what I'll cover in this talk. And I expect it to go about maybe 30 to 35 minutes. There'll be time at the end for questions, and then I think Rolf will come back on and we'll talk a little bit more about how you can get involved. So that's what I'd like to cover today. So I think before we talk about the future and where we are with EVs and how good or bad they are, it's important to understand kind of how we got where we are. And the Model T, the first Model T which was the first mass-produced car, rolled off the assembly line over 110 years ago, and that was using an internal combustion engine. And since then, it took 110 years, and cars have really become ingrained in our lifestyles around the world, and probably particularly in the United States. So pivoting to a cleaner approach is not going to be quick. It's not going to be easy, but it is going to be really critical to limiting the damage that we do to the climate with the emissions that internal combustion engines put out. You can see on this slide that worldwide vehicles produce 3 billion tons of carbon, and that's just incredibly environmentally harmful. And electric vehicles produce very, very much less, especially once they're up and running. Another little spoiler alert, but the process of building an EV does take a little bit more CO2, but it's paid back fairly quickly, usually within the first couple of years. And that's, I think that'll go down in time as well. So, but we do have so many vehicles in the United States and the world. There's 1.5 billion vehicles on the roads. That's expected to grow. There are over 1 million gas pumps. So in that 110 years since the ICE started rolling off the assembly line, we've been growing the number of gas pumps out there, and there's 1 million now. Now, when you think about gas pumps, it's not really a fair. We're not going to have gas pumps or electric pumps in the future. So all those gas pumps will eventually go away or start to go away because most charging is going to be done at home. We'll talk a little bit more about charging as well, because that's one of the critical factors in acceptance of or adoption of electric vehicles. We're selling about 3.4 million vehicles in the United States today annually, and 74 million vehicles worldwide. And the transportation sector accounts for about 20% worldwide and in the United States of the total CO2 that we're producing. So I believe that's the second highest area. I think heating our homes and our buildings and our factories is the actual biggest CO2 producer. Transportation is pretty high up there as well. So, it's a very large industry. We're not going to be able to turn on a dime. From what I'm reading, it's probably going to take as much as 20 or 30 years to move fully to electric. And there's also some other promising technologies that may come about. We'll talk about those too. So let's talk about the benefits of electric vehicles. They are less expensive to drive. And when I looked at this, I looked at what does it cost to own the vehicle from the day you buy it until the day you decommission it. And because obviously buying gas is more expensive, especially today, than using electricity. I talked to a friend a couple of days ago in California, and they were paying $6.50 for gas per gallon. Here in Arizona, I think we're paying, well, I've seen as much as $5 here. I think that is potentially could come down, but I don't think it's ever going to go down in the $2 or $3 range the way it used to. So this first statement here, 200 miles per gallon, that's at $4 a gallon. So let's say your car gets 20 miles to the gallon, you're really 10 times less expensive once you're actually fueling. I'm not talking about buying the vehicle. Once you're actually fueling and driving the vehicle, it could be as much as 10 times less expensive to drive an EV. Some of the other benefits, obviously, no noise pollution. They're silent. And if you've driven or if you've been around an EV, it's a little strange to not hear any noise coming out of an EV at all. I've got a Toyota Prius, which is a plug-in vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, and it took a little getting used to it. It's just so quiet. And I think that can actually be a little dangerous. And I think they talked about putting some limited, very, very quiet noise in so that when people are stepping off curbs, you hear something. But obviously, it's nice not to have all that noise. This is probably the biggest one in terms of climate. The next one is that there are no tailpipe emissions. So actually, there is not even a tailpipe on an EV at all. Driving obviously creates an awful lot of emissions, and idling is particularly bad. So when people are stopped in traffic or at stop signs and lights, the idling is particularly bad. A lot of cars and vehicles sit around and idling, and all that time they're idling, they're putting CO2 into the atmosphere. Overall, lower repair costs, and the reason for that is pretty simple. An ICE, or I keep saying ICE, internal combustion engine vehicle, has about 200 moving parts, and there's just not that many parts, so there's less to break down. So consider there's no spark plugs, there's no oil, there's no crankshaft, there's many things that just don't exist. It's just a much simpler technology, so therefore it's simpler to maintain. Another thing that people love, and I don't have an EV, but I have driven one. They're really fun to drive. I don't know if you've seen it, but they go from 0 to 60 in very, very quick, and they tend to handle very, very well. So they're fun to drive. People like them. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a lot of them on the road now, particularly Teslas. Tesla's an interesting story in itself. They got a real head start in the marketplace, and they are really the ones to watch right now. I think the one of the Tesla models is one of the highest selling vehicles in the United States right now. And I'll talk a little bit more about Tesla at the end. They're a huge driving factor in the market because they got that head start. And another benefit is that for qualifying vehicles, you can get up to $7,500. And they just changed it. Actually, I read yesterday that $7,500 used to be when you do your taxes in the spring. And I think as of January 1st, you'll get that $7,500 back at the dealership. So the way it will work is uh, you won't even ever have to pay that $7,500. The government is going to reimburse the dealers for that $7,500. And we'll talk a little bit more about what vehicles qualify. It's not every single vehicle, and there are some limits, but I think more and more vehicles will qualify over time. So, as I said before, it took us 110 years to get where we are. There are some current issues, and they're valid. I think the biggest one probably is the batteries and the battery production. So right now, all electric vehicles run on the lithium-ion batteries, and there are some harmful mining practices involved. We'll talk on the next slide a little bit about where the raw materials come from and how that's changing over time. And there are some issues with the lithium ion with safety. They can heat up, and they can catch fire. I think the safety issues are getting better. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about lithium ion batteries a little bit more because I think it's so important to understand. We all kind of understand how an internal combustion engine works, but I didn't know much about how the batteries actually work. We're going to talk about that a little bit more and about where the raw materials come from. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. So a common complaint is battery disposal. And, are we producing millions of vehicles where the batteries are just going to end up in a landfill? Well, because the market is changing so rapidly, a lot of companies now are interested in battery recycling. And even now, the batteries are 80% recyclable, which is pretty good. And I feel like over time, that will actually improve. So, that is a valid concern, but I think it's because there's such an economic advantage to being able to recycle. There are lots of companies that are doing that now. And like I said at the beginning, things are changing very rapidly. When I first put this presentation together, it was 14 months ago, I think. And in researching and trying to update myself for this, a lot of things have changed just in 12 months or 14 months. So things are changing very rapidly and mostly to the benefit of EVs. So another example is the charging station. So what's the downside of our charging station network today? Well, it's pretty hard to drive, not hard, but it's not as easy as it is in a gas car to drive across the country. So this range anxiety has limited adoption, but I think I've got a slide further on that talks about how that's changing. One of the big things is the federal programs to increase the public charging stations. And keep in mind too that most people charge at home. Taking a trip across the country, I've read some blogs about people who have done that, including some of the CEOs of the big car makers. They've had interesting and not entirely smooth trips across the country. So we have a ways to go, but we've made some great progress, and everything that I'm reading and everything I see says that we're going to make it a lot easier to get around, especially on those longer trips. People have had some issues and concerns about charging time. Full charging can take 30 minutes, even with the highest level charger. So level 3 is the highest charge, and level 2 is likely what you'd have in your garage at home. And level 2 can take 4 or 5 hours, but typically people are doing that at night, so they can get a full charge overnight. Newer batteries, which I'm going to talk about, promise both more density for a longer range and decreased charge time. I think within the next 10 years, we'll get the charge down time, full charge time, probably down to 10 or 15 minutes. It may not be quite as fast as filling up your car, but I think most people can deal with 10 or 15 minutes for a full charge, especially if it's going to take you 400 or 500 miles, which is I think what we'll have um, in the next 10 years. I looked at battery degradation. People are concerned with, how long does an EV battery last, since that's such a critical component in an EV, obviously. So I found that batteries lose 1% per life, I'm sorry, per year for the life. So, and those batteries, they say last 10 to 15 years. I think that will get better. But I also found that that's comparable to gas vehicles. They lose about 1% of their power every year. So it's not that different from internal combustion engines. In terms of cost, right now, without the tax breaks, EVs on average are about $10,000 more than gas cars. But like I said, rebates, although they're limited at this point, can give you a $7,500 credit on new vehicles, and I think it's $4,000 on used vehicles. And battery costs are the most expensive component in in an EV is the battery, and the technology is just improving so quickly that I think the cost overall will continue to come down. I believe Tesla now has a model that, including the rebate, can get you down below $30,000 for an EV. So, everything here, they're all valid concerns, but they're all concerns that are because of the way capitalism works. There's a tremendous amount of money going into battery and better components for the way the cars are built. There's a real race to win here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the batteries. I didn't know a lot about this. What really drives an EV? It's the lithium-ion battery, and there is an awful lot of material that goes into those batteries. You can see the number of pounds going into just one cell. It's substantial, and EV batteries are heavier than internal combustion engines. And they weigh about 1,000 to 2,000 pounds, and I think that will come down in time. I think we talked about the recycling. Some of the major materials used in the battery are cobalt, nickel, and lithium, and they're all mined using environmentally damaging methods. It takes 500,000 gallons of water to extract just 1 ton of lithium. So that is a real concern. I think I'm going to talk about solid state batteries, which have the potential to cut that amount way down. So, these are some real concerns, but anytime, you look at a negative, you also have to look at the negative of the alternative. So if we weren't doing this mining, we'd be mining for our oil, and we'd be putting all that carbon dioxide in the air. So, there's, like I said, there's no silver bullet, and every solution is going to have a downside, but you just have to weigh one versus the other. A little bit more about lithium batteries in their production. A lot comes from China. That's changing over time. All the major car manufacturers are trying to create their own supply chains because they see a huge, this is going to happen over time. So the car manufacturers are all rushing to create their own supply chains and do more building within the United States. Right now, some of the materials come from, like the cobalt most of it comes from the Republic of Congo. Nickel comes from Indonesia, Australia, and Brazil. And 75% of lithium today is mined in South America. Now that's changing. And in getting ready to give this presentation, I found a couple interesting things. These are actually from the last couple of days. So I believe it was yesterday or the day before. Steve Schlieb's, a colleague of mine, sent me this note that Tesla, although they've been building this lithium plant in Texas, it's going to come online quicker than expected. So within next year, they're going to be actually producing this lithium, and enough lithium to produce 1 million cars annually, and that's a substantial amount. Also, I read that this Thacker Pass in northern Nevada is a huge reserve of lithium. Um, they think they'll be up and running within the next couple of years. So as you can see, things are changing very rapidly. There's a huge rush to secure the supply chains and do a lot of it in the United States if we can. I think I read about I think on 60 Minutes I saw that there's another huge lithium deposit in California somewhere. So it'd be great to have that come into the United States and have us control it. And the other good thing about that is our practices for employing the folks that mine us can be a little tighter than it might be in countries like the Congo. My next slide talks about solid state batteries. Now they are 3 to 5 years away. I think the earliest I could find was I think it was Mercedes-Benz possibly. They said they might have a solid state battery within 3 years. The big environmental difference is that these solid state batteries require much less mining and much less water. So those are really great things for the environment. But you can see from the circles there that their solid state batteries are pretty much better in every way. They last longer, they're more reliable. There's no risk of catching fire. They're smaller. They don't lose as much of their power over the years, and they store more. So it's really going to change the manufacturing process. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of what the inside of an EV looks like, but right now the battery pretty much takes up the entire floor of the vehicle. And the fact that these batteries are going to be smaller and denser will probably change the form factor of how cars are built. And they will be able to be lighter, which is good as well. So there's really a whole lot of promise with these solid state batteries. I'm pretty excited about this. So there's a couple of slides here that I call the money slides because they're directly asking the question, are EVs actually environmentally beneficial? And this slide kind of gets right at that question. So on the left hand, we have how much CHG is produced in the life cycle of a car. It's really important to look at the life cycle. We don't want to just look at what it takes to drive it. We also want to look at what it takes to manufacture it. And what this slide tells us is that it's very different. The life cycle, the environmental life cycle or CHG life cycle is very different between a gas car and an EV car. So it is true that the production process in building an EV car, you can see it's building the battery takes quite a bit of because of all the mining and the manufacturing, it takes quite a bit. There's other manufacturing as well, and then so you can see that what takes a gas car. I'm sorry, you lose most of your or you emit most of your carbon obviously once you're actually running it. And this is talking about an EV with a 300-mile range and a gas car. I think it was with a 25 mile per gallon rating. So you can see that it's in this area that the gas car is not as efficient and is more environmentally damaging than an EV. A little bit more on that. So I like this slide because it kind of explains that same slide, but in a different way. So on the left, you have your CO2 emissions. On the bottom, you have your miles driven. So this says, when is the environmental payback? And what really matters here is where your electricity is coming from. If your electricity is coming from a coal-fired plant, it's going to take more time for the electric vehicle to pay off. But over time, as we go to more renewables, this green line is going to come down. Right now, overall, I would say the payback's probably a year and a half, and most cars are driven about at least 10 years. So right now, it's much more environmentally friendly to drive an EV. But over time, as this green line slides down, it might be 6 months or a year that the payback comes, because it does take more to produce that electric vehicle, but it's the actual miles you put on an ICE car that make it environmentally damaging. So really here, the question becomes, okay, well, if the issue is, what are you sourcing? How are you sourcing your energy? Let's take a look at that for Arizona. I know we have people from other places, but hopefully it's similar to this. So I looked at APS, which is where Arizona gets most of its power, and they have a pretty good plan. And actually, even now, 45%. I'm sorry. Yeah, even now, or 3 years ago, 50% of the electricity that's generated is not coming from uh, carbon burning. So that I was kind of surprised there. So that this line for Arizona may even actually be a little lower because we're already using non-fossil fuel alternatives. They've got some pretty aggressive goals too. By 2050, they want to be 100% clean energy, and 2030 they're going to be 65%. Another key one here is that no more coal fire in 2031, which is only 7 years away, 6 or 7 years away. So I think that's pretty impressive. One of the things that I did some math on this slide, and it was interesting that there seemed to be some gaps, but I found out that this Palo Verde nuclear generating station, which is just west of Phoenix, it's actually the highest producing generator in the United States. It generates 3.3 gigawatts of power yearly, and that services 4.4 million people. So no matter, you may have thoughts about nuclear and the safety of nuclear, but the fact is it does not generate, it doesn't put CHG into the atmosphere, and we can use it to clean power our vehicles. So I was pretty happy with this slide. It makes me feel better about buying EV because once again, I'm not just using electricity generated by coal, which wouldn't make sense. So I think this looks like it's moving in the right direction. Now on charging, I'm sure some of you heard about the NEVI program, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. So that was a $5 billion bill that funded building charging stations along the United States highway corridors. And the idea was to make sure there was charging in stations at least every 50 miles. So I looked at Arizona's plan and how it's coming. Arizona got $76.5 million from that $5 billion. And I looked at progress a couple days ago, where they are with building these stations. Is the contracts have been awarded and the actual construction of these stations has begun every 50 miles. And they're planning on expanding these stations to other highways. It looks like work on the original has begun and the extended stations, it's all expected to be completed by 2026, which is just really 2 years away, a little over 2 years away. So things are moving quick, and we could show a map of the United States that shows all the major highways, and that you're going to be able to fuel along all the major highways I would say, within the next 2 or 3. I mean, you can do it now, but I've read some interesting blogs about people taking trips across country, and quite honestly, it hasn't been totally smooth. There's been some issues with reliability. There's been some zones, some areas where it's tougher to find, but I think because of these major investments, I think that's going to change over time. It's only going to get better, and also range will get better. So, like I said, everything's moving quickly and in the favor of EVs. I wanted to talk about the Federal Inflation Reduction Act's impact on EVs. That act did a lot to move things along, and I think it's a really powerful act. I'll tell you why. So before this act came in, I think a year or two ago, there used to be a limit of 200 vehicles that could get the rebate. Now there's no limitation. They extended this out to 2032, so it's going to go on for another 10 years. They did put a limit on what the cars can cost. The limit now is $55,000 for cars and $8,000 for SUVs. So if it's more than that, you're not eligible for the credit. Vehicles have to comply with battery component requirements, and that's progressive. So what this act says is that we want to do more battery production in the United States. So, for example, vehicles built in China will not be eligible. So what this is really doing is encouraging the auto manufacturers to bring the production process online because, saving $7,500 per vehicle is going to generate a lot more sales. So over time, they're really bringing a lot of that. They're going to be bringing a lot of that production and online in the United States. As far as how much someone can make and still get the credit, it's $150,000 for a single filer and $300,000 for joint filers. I mentioned that the credit is now available at the time of sale instead of later, and that's obviously a big advantage. No one wants to wait. Everyone wants the discount up front. And the credits are also available for used vehicles up to $4,000. Let's take a look at trends. Like I said, everything seems to be moving in the direction of positive direction, and I think this slide bears that out as well. So we started at about 80,000 vehicles. These are new sales 5 years ago, and now last year it was close to 500,000 vehicles. It's still in the United States only represents about 6% of new car sales. And I'll show you some projections on where they think that's going. The models, we now have 134 models available for the 2024 model year, and that's projected to be 200 models by 2030. So you can get pretty much any type of vehicle, from a very small vehicle up to Tesla now has its Cybertruck. I don't know if you've seen it. It's pretty interesting looking. And another good example is Ford has the I think it's one of their F vehicles is electric, and that's been pretty popular as well. So, and it's statistics in terms of what it can pull, and it's pretty impressive. It's faster. It's really it's going to become a popular vehicle. It's still pretty expensive, but my point is that many types of vehicles will be available, and that's only going to expand. On the charging, we've gone from 25,000 ports to 148,000 today, and Tesla recently opened up its 50,000 ports to all electric vehicles. So that's a huge change right there. So now we have over 200,000 charging stations, and it's only going to go up in time. The distance that these models can go is also increasing pretty rapidly. Actually, the Lucid model, which is built here in Arizona, has a 500 plus mile range. That is a pretty expensive car, the one built here in Arizona, but 291 miles is the average range. And I expect that to go up, especially with those solid state batteries. I wouldn't be surprised if the average was more like 400 within the next couple of years. It's only going to go up. And that's just a convenience factor. I mean, if you're powering at home, it really doesn't matter much because you're going to let it sit and charge overnight anyhow. But it should really help with that range anxiety, which I mentioned as a negative before. These are just a couple of charts showing the short-term and long-term projections for where electric vehicles are going. You can see, I mean, the things that jump out to me on these slides is that China is moving very rapidly. This year, China's selling about 15% of their cars are electric. And like I said, we're at about 6, I believe. And if you look at long-term out by 2030, we're going to be at about 40% electric vehicles. And if you go all the way out to 2040, it looks like we'll be about 70%. I think, and I didn't get a chance to look at this morning, but most of the major auto manufacturers have said they are going to phase out the internal combustion engine altogether. Different timelines. I believe I saw this morning that Ford said 2035. So you won't be able to buy electric gas vehicles at some point in time. It's just not going to be in the best interest of the manufacturers to make them anymore. This is just another chart showing, in a little bit more detail about where we've been and where we're going. So back in 2019, we were only at 2% of new vehicle sales, and you can see it's growing very rapidly. And by 2028, this chart says we'll be at 17%. So it's growing very rapidly. I think it'll this will only go faster as we get those solid state batteries and we eliminate some of the issues I mentioned, like range anxiety, how far you can drive on a single charge. I think this is kind of a conservative estimate. I think it'll go even quicker. But it's interesting. There's everything kind of has to work in concert. You have to have the manufacturers producing the cars. You have to have the charging stations. You have to have the batteries. And because everything's moving fast, sometimes those things get out of sync. So there may be periods of time that, we've got the manufacturing capability, but we don't have enough charging, or any of those things can be a little out of sync. And as things are moving so quickly, there may be fits and starts, but in general, I think it's going to go pretty quickly. The economic incentives for big companies to get these systems in place are huge, and the ones that are going to get there first are going to be the winners. So, the economy is going to drive the rapid adoption. I wanted to touch on just all the topics. I wasn't sure how long the presentation would go, but hybrid vehicles are a reasonable transitory technology. Of course, they still generate, they still run on the internal combustion engine, but they do get better gas mileage, so obviously they're better for the environment. And I don't know if everyone is familiar with plug-in hybrid vehicles. They came out after the traditional hybrid vehicles, and what they do is they allow you to charge at home and get a certain number of miles without any gas at all. So the ones that I was looking at get between 25 and 35 miles. So if you're just tooling around town, that's all you really do, or you have a very short commute, you can really do that without using any gas at all. So that's something that helps, and maybe it's a transitory till we get to all EVs. I think I mentioned the auto manufacturers' EV commitments, and the one I could see this morning was Ford says by 2035, no more internal combustion engine cars made. And two other types of vehicles that may come into play are hydrogen vehicles and fuel cell vehicles. I didn't really get enough time to research these. They're certainly not as popular. There are some production hydrogen vehicles, but the number of sales, the percentage of sales is way down. And I think there's a future talk coming up on hydrogen. I think David Spence is giving that talk. So maybe he'll talk a little bit about hydrogen vehicles and where they stand. Okay. So I hope I've given you a view of EVs by starting out kind of with where we are, some of the positives, some of the negatives, some of the trends. So, Rolf and I and others, a couple others on the call work for this nonprofit called NASCA, and we have these climate action teams. So we have something called an ECAT, which is the Electrification Climate Action Team. And what we're trying to do is accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles, which will reduce emissions and cost less for consumers. In a couple of ways, we're doing this. Obviously, we're doing this information outreach like we are today. We've done quite a bit of gathering of petitions. I know that in Flagstaff, we're broken into several regions. Our Flagstaff region has been very effective. I think they got thousands of signatures and presented them to City Hall. I think it's a pretty effective way of letting our leaders know that their constituents are behind electrification. So we've been having these meetings. We really want to promote the electrification of not just private cars, but government fleets are a great example. Fleets typically don't go very far. They all return to their base at the end of the day. So they're a great model for electric vehicles. Here in my town of Sedona, we've got 86 vehicles in the fleet. We have a climate action plan that says that they are going to replace all of the fleet vehicles by 2030. There's 86 vehicles, and I believe only 2 have been replaced so far, or maybe 3. So one of the things we're doing in Sedona is trying to keep them to their commitments. It seems like, and I think this has happened in our Flagstaff area as well, we have these climate action plans which have been approved within the last couple of years that have some pretty aggressive goals, but it's easy to produce these plans, but it's hard to implement them. So part of NASCA's and these CATs, part of what we're doing is trying to keep these, keep the politicians to doing what they actually agreed to do. And quite honestly, it's been difficult to even find out if we're on track. And we're kind of get to the point where it'd be very hard to meet the goals that are being set if you don't get a start at the beginning. And as an example, you really only want to replace things when cars reach their end of life. So you're not going to buy 50 vehicles in the last year. So my point is, if you get behind, it's very difficult to catch up. So I think we need to put pressure, especially when these plans are already in place and they're not being kept here. So that's a real issue. We want to avoid partisan politics, noting how we can reduce CO2. And especially like I showed that graph for Northern Arizona, we do have the sun and wind power, and so we're not powering our EVs with coal. So I don't know, Rolf, do you want to take questions at this
Yeah, absolutely.
point and then
Fantastic.
talk about how to get involved?
Yeah, well, your presentation is outstanding. It's a great, concise overview. And I was thinking, if you approve, people can write their questions into the chat box and you can take them one by one. Is that all right with
Or I
you,
don't know.
Bill?
Yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
Rolf. I think we can probably open it up. There's only 15 of us. I think we can
Yeah,
take the
okay.
questions. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine. So let's see if everyone can. I think there are no restrictions whatsoever, so please proceed. If you dare, you can raise your hand too, and if we get too many, I can call on you, but just first one up, go ahead. We had a question there in the chat, by the way, Bill, and maybe you want to take that one first. I know you addressed it, but about the grandson that says that there's a battery waste and the electric recharging pollutes as much as gasoline. You want to readdress that again?
Uh, I guess I'd ask, is it Peggy who asked that question or Diana? I'm not sure who asked the question. I think it was Diana, but I'm just wondering if the slides that I went through, um, you think that would help explaining it to your neighbor? Yes? Oh, she can't talk.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I didn't have a chance to ask you if it would be okay to take pictures of your slides. So I went ahead and did it, but if you don't want me to share them, I can get rid of them. But I think it's really great. And, things take time. And so the crossover is what we're looking at is long term, is what I got from this, that, yeah, there are some down things, but the long term, like everything else, is way worth it.
Yeah, and feel free to share the slides.
Okay, thank you. I won't sell them or anything like that. But yeah.
I think it's good. I think the more they get out,
Also for
Any other-
everyone, if I can jump in there, hope you can hear me. On the NASCA website, there is a downloadable presentation that Bill has provided or the other speakers have provided. So you can download anything there. And this includes this talk today that's being recorded.
So there's another chat question from Sophia. I'd like to answer. So she's asking about the mining practices and if mining practices they are harmful. But I think once again, you have to look at the mining practices versus putting all that carbon into the atmosphere. It's not, I don't think it's an equal. I don't think the mining practices are as bad. I mean, like I said, there's no silver bullet. And I think that mining practices I think they'll get better. I mean, there's going to be more mining, but those solid state batteries require much less mining. So I think it'll get better that way. And you always have to weigh, and no one's saying the mining practices aren't bad or bad for the people doing the mining, but you also have to weigh that versus what we're doing to the atmosphere. One more message here. Talked about fracked natural gas. It's true. First principle. question. Steve, do you have a comment? You mentioned the first principles question. Oh, can you unmute him, Rolf?
Yeah, you should be able to unmute yourself, Steve. Lower left-hand corner.
I got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll just take a half a minute maybe to talk about this ECAP goal. I mean, I see the petition you're circulating. You're demanding 100% EVs immediately, but the question is, where are they going to plug them in? Where are they going to charge them? There's no facilities in Sedona to charge 80 vehicles. So, but you back up further and see, well, where's the electricity going to come in from? They could put 80 pedestals up there, but there's no power coming into it. So if you look at the amount of gasoline energy that we're burning today, that we want to stop doing that, and that same equivalent of energy has to come from electricity. It's going to take about 3 times more electricity than we currently have, and the transmission and distribution networks that goes with it. So just demanding 100% electric vehicles now is pointless because it's impossible. So that's kind of the first principles look at it.
Yeah, so I think when we apply pressure, Steve, it's not just buying vehicles, right? We have to look at the whole picture, and maybe that's not.
So, but yes, but Bill, how far
I
up?
hope that's being thought of, but it may not be. And so one of the things that we can do.
Well,
I lost that question.
Maybe there is something we can do. Instead of petitioning the city council, why don't we petition the Arizona Corporation Commission? But then that's a pretty difficult topic to wrap your head around, how the Corporation Commission works and how they set how they influence Arizona Public Service Company and what they're doing. So it just becomes a very broad, vast topic that's far more.
Yeah.
Yes, it's far deeper than just demanding electric vehicles. And our Sedona's climate action plan that says they're going to have 100% electric vehicles by 2030 is patently absurd. They couldn't do it if they wanted to.
Yes, true. So Steve, while we have you, it looked like Peggy asked what it takes to install a home charging system. You've done that yourself recently, right?
Yes, I did. Well, I have a Tesla. I've been driving it for a year, and if anybody out there local, I'd love to give test drives to people. It's just kind of fun for me. But yes, I am charged. I bought the home charging station. It's a level 2 overnight charger bought it directly from Tesla, and I think it cost $400. In my particular case, I had to hire an electrician to come and make the 240 volt 60 amp circuit to run the charger, and that cost me $1,000. But now I charge at home for 12 cents per kilowatt hour, which translates into about 3 cents per mile. That means I could drive 100 miles for $3 on a fuel charge. So hope that touches your question.
Any other questions?
Bill,
Yes.
it's Jill Stevenson here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm on my phone,
Jill.
so I'm never
Yes.
sure whether I'm plugged in. Okay. Great presentation. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Because we're pushing hard up here in Flagstaff to get the various government entities to move faster with electrification of their vehicles. 2 questions. Talking about rebates. What if a person is retired and does not earn enough money or have enough money coming in to pay taxes? Are rebates still available to them?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. The limits are on the most you can make, not the least.
Okay.
So if you make less than $150,000 a year, you're eligible.
Okay, even if you're not a taxpayer.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Great.
Yeah. If you're not a taxpayer, it's not an issue at all. It's
Okay.
that's the most you can make. So if you
Okay.
make nothing.
great.
I think it's not an issue. You'll get the rebate.
Okay. Solid state batteries, what are they? What makes them different from lithium batteries?
Well, I'm not, but it's the chemistry of it and the materials that go into it. It's just a
Okay.
different chemical process. It's a more, let's just say it's a more efficient process. But
Okay,
I'm not a scientist, so I can't tell you. All I know is it's a different type of process that has all those benefits we
okay, great, thank you.
mentioned.
And one more thing, one thing that we are hoping to incorporate in our presentations to the city and the county and the school district and NAU in terms of electrifying their fleets is helping them set some milestones. You know, not saying it has to be 100% right now because we know that's unrealistic, like Steve was saying, but helping them to set some realistic milestones and helping them by providing, you know, grant information and examples of other municipalities or counties where electrification of fleet vehicles has progressed well.
Mhm.
And we appreciate any ideas from other people.
One thing that we had looked into and kind of backed off a little bit, but there's a tremendous amount of grant money available for electric school buses.
Right.
That's one area we might want to retill that soil because there's a tremendous amount of money available for that. And I can't think of anything better. You know, you think about kids driving, riding in a
Right.
clean bus. It should be easy to
Right.
sell because it's their future. We don't want them, choking the diesel fumes from their buses. So I think that might be something we can leverage.
Yeah, and Dave Spence has done a lot of research on that. And he is also promoting the idea of repowering current gas power or diesel powered buses. And maybe incorporating a program for high school students to be trained in that, you know, after they graduate, to go to the local community college and then be hired by the school district to just do just that. Because there are a lot of buses that are not ready to be replaced yet.
Right. Looks like Steve, you have your hand up.
Well, Bill, if you have just a couple more minutes, the comment I would like to say about
Sure.
for me is the battery facts and the batteries ending up in landfills. I think it's safe to say that no electric car battery will ever end up in a landfill. It's too early to say because they seem to be lasting a long time, but a completely used up electric car battery is a high grade ore source. So it would be every single atom of critical material in that car battery can be used again over and over again. So that's the every atom of lithium, every atom of graphite, nickel, copper, manganese, and especially cobalt will be used repeatedly. It makes no sense to take it to a landfill. So we hear these horror stories about the children in Africa who are digging cobalt out of the ground with their bare fingers. Well, once it's mined, it stays mined. You don't throw it away. In comparison to gasoline, once it's extracted from the earth and burned, it's gone forever. You can't recycle burned gasoline.
Yeah.
So that's my comment on that topic. That's what I would tell that 10-year-old kid that Diane was.
Ralph, you had your hand up.
Yeah, well, I noticed that Jeremy Shiamek had asked a question, and maybe you want to address that. He had a mention of a Lightning Ford. I don't know what he meant by that.
Yeah, I didn't know the name of the Ford Lightning truck, but it's an F1. I think that was just informational.
Okay. Just for
Ralph,
Yeah, well, just for everyone's reference, there are a number of people on here that do not live in northern Arizona. And first of all, there's some heroic people on this program, including Jill and Dee, that have been out there getting signatures on the EV petition in Flagstaff. They're over 2,100 now. And that is a way, no matter where you are in the United States or even outside the US, to get people involved and push for the change that we need. And related to that, I have a question for all of you, and especially Bill, the issue of the opposition. Like I read yesterday that Trump supporters are opposing EV on the basis of different arguments that they want to protect the current auto workers instead of having them go unemployed because of the electrification process. Do you want to address that?
You know, it is an issue, and actually part of the current strike has to do with the transition to electric vehicles. I mean, the simple fact is that EVs are not as complex to create, so they are going to need less workers. So it's really a matter of getting those workers retooled. It's no different from, you know, we're going to need a lot of people on solar power. We're going to need a lot of people on wind power. So, you know, things change, and there probably is not going to be as many auto workers necessary. I read that Tesla, you know, and I wanted to talk about Tesla just for a minute. I mean, they are absolute groundbreakers. They have the advantage of not, you know, starting out as an EV company, so they don't have to retool. They have some incredibly efficient plants, and they're actually leading the way and helping the other manufacturers figure out how to build efficient plants. Now, Tesla is not unionized, and I heard there's a $20 delta between what Tesla workers make on the line and what UAW workers make. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of push-pull there, and I don't, you know, to be honest, there's no easy answer. It's going to be an issue. If you produce a vehicle, it's less complicated. You're going to need less workers. It's that simple. But look at some of the benefits. Look at all the charging stations that need to go in. Look at all this new battery technology. It's just like, it's really no different from computers and what happened with computers. And now look at what's happening with AI. A lot of people are worried they're going to lose their job to AI. Well, that may be true, but you're talking about today's jobs. So those people really have to look at what tomorrow's jobs are. So this has happened over the last, you know, 100 years, right? Things change, and people are going to have to retool, and it's just a fact.
Diana has a question there, her hand raised. Yeah. Oh, you have to
you can unmute yourself.
Lower.
There we go. Got it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it was saying it couldn't. So first, I love this. Thank you so much. I have, this is a personal question, and talking to neighbors who are thinking and talking about this, we've had a lot of conversations about this from a very smaller perspective. And that is, you know, like I have a 2012 Ford Escape that is, you know, nickeling and diming me now and all, and I'd really want to get electric, but I'm weighing, like, is it now to do it? Should I wait a couple years and keep adding more money into my Escape, or is this the time to make the jump? The other thing is, I've been looking at Consumer Reports and different things, you know, between the hybrid or the all electric or the hybrid plug-in. And you did mention the transition thing. And people say, well, wait another couple of years because there's going to be so many changes. But I'm very much into, if I can do something now in my own little way, I want to do that now. So I didn't know if you had any suggestions. You also mentioned that that car that's being made here in Arizona, not cheap. I saw that, but that it gets 500 miles, or will be getting 500 miles. I drive mostly in town, but now and then I do have to long distance kind of stuff. But and I have neighbors who are talking about needing to get new cars, and how do you kind of,
so yeah,
what do you follow to make a decision?
even though your question is personal, it's actually perfect because a lot of people are like you're saying, your neighbors and all across the country, people are seeing all this news about EVs. So I think the time, it depends, obviously, but from what you've described, I think there's several factors that make it a good point now. I bought a new car 3 years ago and I seriously considered it, but I did not go EV. I have another car that is a hybrid. But I think if the landscape was what it was now, I probably would have picked an EV for these reasons. One is the $7,500 credit. I mean, that's substantial. Two is the range has increased. Three, there's more charging stations. You can see, where that's going. If you primarily are going to be charging at home, and you don't go on cross-country trips, I think the time is now. Will it be better 2 years from now, and will you regret, not waiting a couple of years? I don't think so because it sounds like you have the environment in mind. That's going to feel good every day, and there's no saying you couldn't trade your car in a couple of years for something that gets, has more range or other features that you like. So I think the time is now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I want to thank everybody for taking a little bit of your Saturday, and I hope you'll attend some of the other sessions coming up. Rolf, did you want to talk about
Yeah.
how to get involved?
Just real quick, if you could take your slide presentation to the final two. First of all, for anyone who's in Northern Arizona, I urge you to connect with the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance because we are building groups everywhere. We have an electrical group or electrification vehicle campaign going on in Prescott, for instance, and in Flagstaff. We hope to expand elsewhere. If you are with Friday for Future, for example, there's also a link where you can connect to do certain things in certain cities in the same way. It's up to you as an individual to take the initiative. Solutions come through us. Believe it or not, politicians respond to what we want. I always describe them as very much afraid. So think about what you can do in this perspective. And if you are extremely wealthy, you're also welcome to make a donation to what we are doing at the bottom slide, the next bottom slide. But these are two links here where you can go to get connected with NASCA or the Friday for Future, who are the sponsors of this event, by the way. And the next slide down would be for donations. And thank you all for coming on. It's appreciated. And we have another talk coming on in roughly 2 weeks, and you can see that on the schedule at the website of NASCA. And eventually we will have also, we'll be featuring the head of the Friday for Future movement in the United States on January 6th as one important date of many. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Great.
Appreciate it.
And Bill,
Yeah.
outstanding. I love your talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Easy
Great.
to
Very
follow.
important. Yeah.
And
Gave
thank
us a
you.
lot
Thank
of
everybody for what you're doing. Everybody's doing.
Yeah. Thank you all for being on. Yeah.
Take care.
See
all.
you
you for
later.
having us.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Jeez.